So, crypto markets are trading sideways right now, seeing a little bit of green opening up the week. Right now, there's a lot of anticipation with the heat map showing exactly where liquidity could be sitting for the upside as well as for the downside, moving towards that 80,000 zone and then moving upwards to that 92,000 region. This is where a lot of people are anticipating that the pumps in the market are not necessarily due to, euphoria and all the different things moving in the markets, but more the talks from, bears and bulls and overall how everyone's anticipating that everything's going to be running up. But in today's video, I want to walk through the key news events that are going to be happening this week, which are going to be causing a lot of volatility in the markets. On top of that, the perspectives around Bitcoin and Ethereum and what you need to be, looking at if you have altcoins. I have an altcoin portfolio. It is getting absolutely destroyed. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into the price action, the news events, and what you need to be aware of. So, as I said, markets are seeing a little bit of green, trading sideways. We ran up to that 89,000 region, and now we're starting to see that sideways price action. More than likely, probably going to be seeing deviations, if not a little bit more of a rip to the upside. You can see with the price action around Bitcoin, we have been pretty much trading sideways, mainly on a downward trend. But like how I said, on the 24-hour, we did see a significant pump in the market, and right now we are testing an area of support to really determine if we are going to keep on breaking down, which in my opinion, I'm probably, deeming that we're going to be breaking down. Ethereum is also following the price action around Bitcoin, pretty much just on this downward trajectory. I'm sure it's going to respect this trend line, and it's already pretty much showing some weakness, but at the end of the day, this is where some people are anticipating we're going to be seeing a little bit more green. Benjamin Cohen has been one individual that has been saying that, Ethereum more than likely is going to be bleeding against Bitcoin moving into December. But with all that being said, this is where it has an effect on all coins. The coins that you're investing in, the coins that I'm investing in. When Ethereum starts to dump, altcoins start to dump. So since Ethereum was seeing a little bit of a rally today, altcoins saw a little bit of a rally as well. You can also see with Bitcoin dominance that we are actually seeing a crash down, and this is actually pretty good because it kind of points to the fact that liquidity is moving back into Ethereum and altcoins. But at the end of it all, I'm sure that we're pretty much just testing an area of support, and from here we're actually going to be seeing a correction and liquidity pouring back into Bitcoin, squeezing out of altcoins, Ethereum, and much more. Also, a lot of money has been moving into stables as well with USDT dominance. Now, this week and every week, I try to keep you updated on the key news events that happen on a week-to-week basis, because this is what has a huge effect on volatility. So moving into tomorrow, by the time you're already watching this video, we have some important data that's going to be coming out, which is going to be causing a lot of volatility in the market, especially if it's not good data. We're going to be seeing deviations. If it's positive news, potentially we could be seeing pumps. But moving into tomorrow, September PPI inflation data, September retail sales data, the November CB consumer confidence data, and then also October pending home sales data. So this is going to be really letting us know how the Fed is going to be determining rate cuts based off of exactly how specific sectors are looking within the United States, with retail sales, pending home sales data, and then on top of that, inflation data and consumer confidence data based off of exactly how the economy is moving. Moving into Wednesday, we have the US Q3 2025 GDP data, and then September durable goods orders data, and then September PCE inflation data, and September new home sales data. So PCE inflation data and new home sales data is going to be causing a lot of volatility, guys. Of course, durable goods and GDP data as well. But this is where everyone's, really basing their stuff off of the Fed cuts that could be potentially happening in December, not looking too hot. But with all this data is really, determining whether the Fed is going to be making a specific action. Moving into Thursday, it's going to be Thanksgiving, so happy early Thanksgiving if you're in the United States. U.S. markets are closed, and then on Friday, U.S. markets are going to be closing early at 1 p.m. EST. So a short but a very busy week ahead, and this is something that you need to be keeping up with on a week-to-week basis, which is what causes all the volatility in the markets, guys. On top of that, all the perspectives from analysts and traders. So moving into exactly how everything else is looking in the market. U.S. markets are not looking too good in terms with unemployment, inflation data. On top of that, the S&P 500 is down 3% from its record high and up 110 points today, even though, like how I said, we are still massively down. Meanwhile, extreme fear remains in the market. Once again, this is not what you see before a crash. So this is where a lot of people are anticipating that we're going to be seeing a huge pump in the market, but with the fear and greed index, everybody is extremely fearful, which is why I have been telling everyone on the channel that if you do believe in altcoins, I don't think that you should be going balls to the wall investing into altcoins, but you should be dollar cost averaging, especially when altcoins are so down like how they're currently down right now. And that's something that's super big that everyone doesn't anticipate. That extreme fear doesn't mean that we're actually in a bear market. It's actually right before we start to see huge fluctuations in the market. Moving into it, you can see how there's pretty much more information and data on the S&P 500, as well as overall how Bitcoin is extending gains pretty much today. But as I said, we are starting to see a little bit of a correction on the daily time frame. So it's just a matter of time if we're going to be holding this support zone or if we're going to be breaking right down below it. Now, jumping into the heat map around Bitcoin, this is where you can get a understanding on exactly where Bitcoin is going to be headed in terms of a bearish perspective and a bullish perspective. So some decent liquidity clusters are building for Bitcoin now, says Ted Pillows. He says on the upside, Bitcoin has major liquidity zones around 88.5 and 94,000. On the downside, Bitcoin has major liquidity zones around 83,000 and 80,000. And you can see with the heat map, as we start to see, these green zones, it starts to show us exactly where, liquidity is sitting and where potentially we could be moving. This is where I've been anticipating more than likely we're going to be moving downward before we start to move back up. Now, of course, how, data starts to pour out, especially with these key news events, it's going to be having a huge effect. Now, at the end of the day, markets follow liquidity, but we could be seeing a switch up in perspectives based off of data and how everyone is anticipating the movement in the market. So this is where I would tell you that if you are super bullish, that you should be targeting that 88.5 to 94,000 region. If you're still anticipating more downward trajectory moving into the week, 83 to 80K is that target. Now, KillXBT is another individual that has been shorting the market and also longing in specific zones, but he has a very big bearish stance. He talked about exactly how we were sitting in a specific CME gap and we needed to test specific zones. We tested that 88,000, and he goes on to talk about exactly how potentially we're going to form a high on Monday. And he goes on to talk about how there is an imbalance in the 88.5K to 90K zone. And this was about about 6 hours ago. He says, if we fail to flip this region, it will likely mark this week's high and further downside should follow. However, if we do manage to flip, the next target becomes 93K. But so far with the price action around Bitcoin, this is where we are sitting now. It's just flipping a little bit red. You saw how that was green not too long ago. And like how I said, I'm sure we're going to break this area of support. But since we aren't able to break past this region, we saw rejection. This is where Killa is expecting more downward trajectory, and it kind of highlights in Ted's perspective downward to that 83,000 to 80,000 region. Now, moving further into it, he goes on to talk about how liquidations around 89K locally, area to observe for a low time frame reversal, which is where we hit 89K, and then from there we started to deviate down. And this is why it's so good if you keep up with not only the perspectives from analysts and traders, but multiple analysts and traders, the bears and the bulls and the news events, guys. If you're new to the channel, like, comment, subscribe, stay tuned so that you can educate yourself and just learn more on how to actually, navigate the markets. This isn't financial advice by any means. Now, he goes on to talk about a little bit more about how never mistake a short covering rally for underlying strength. All this green in the market, don't expect that this is a huge rally and a pump. He said before, funding rates can be manipulated on certain exchanges to make holding shorts more expensive. Shorts being expensive to hold doesn't necessarily mean the market is heavily net short. Sometimes it simply means that being short is still the correct positioning despite the cost. If a rally is driven purely by short covering rather than genuine spot demand, which is what we saw, then the move is mostly the result of hunting leverage with big players, not real conviction or strength. Such rallies are fragile and are likely to reverse quickly if spot selling resumes, and more than likely it's going to keep resuming, which is why I'm in a bearish stance. Dr. Profit gives his perspective as to why the markets were a little bit green today. He says Bitcoin, the market is not pumping because it's bullish, it's pumping because the mass needs a big bullish gain, a big bullish move again. And this is where you can really understand that all the big people that you follow in the market, they long the market, they short the market, and they're big players. So whenever we start to see mass leverage start to move up, and then guess what? They take profits at key zones, then we start to deviate and break back down. So he goes on to say, it means more liquidity is generated in the downside. Give the market 1 to 2 weeks of some green, and it all turns bullish again. That's when the next leg down starts. And this is why I'm anticipating red in the market as well. Crypto Mitch now gives his perspective on the recent crash and how he thinks it compares to the COVID crash. He says the recent crash on the markets reminds him a lot of the COVID crash on Bitcoin. Yes, it was heavy. People expected to see another test at the lows. Actually, during these times, lower lows were also expected in the COVID crash. It never happened. The higher price went, the more FOMO was getting back on social media, and the bears were getting FOMO to be buying back into Bitcoin. The higher Bitcoin goes during these 1 to 2 weeks, the lower the chance of that low to happen again. So we have altcoin investors getting super bullish, giving everyone a whole bunch of hype. But at the end of the day, liquidity is sitting at specific zones, and liquidity does not lie. So you can feel bullish all you want. You can compare it to previous sectors and previous zones and other cycles. But at the end of the day, more than likely, we're going to be seeing testing of those higher regions and then movement down to the downside. Benjamin Cohen has been, another analyst and trader that gives us the perspective around exactly what's been happening with Bitcoin, how we need to reclaim specific zones, or we're going to keep on moving downward. And this is why I have been anticipating that downward trajectory is still going to be taking place despite all of the euphoria and everything that everyone is saying in the market. You can really start to gain a perspective of your own once you start to learn exactly why everyone is saying what they say. And then you can start to see all the euphoric bulls that are just bull posting and really just pause them and get them out of your feed, because it's a waste of time. You really need to be focusing on the actual liquidity, where it's sitting at, the key news events that are having an effect on the market, the perspectives based off of the macro lens with Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then pretty much what's going to be happening in the near future. Overall, markets are trading sideways, seeing a little bit of green, but we're anticipating that potentially we're going to be seeing more red before we start to see green in the market. My portfolio is getting absolutely freaking destroyed. It is nasty. I don't even want to look at it anymore. Like, I'm sure a few of y'all don't even want to look at y'all's crypto portfolios. But overall, that is what's happening in the market. We have some key news events that are going to be happening this week, even though it is a short week with Thanksgiving that's happening in the United States, which is going to be causing the markets to close. A lot of people are anticipating upward trajectory, downward trajectory based off of the heat map. But this is where you have to pretty much focus on liquidity, the data that comes out on a day-to-day basis, and then from there, what everyone is saying. Whenever you start to see everyone crying and screaming and doing all these different things on X, you could be the smart individual and position yourself correctly in the trajectory that the market is moving. And the way that you do that is by keeping up with the key news events, the price action around Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins, how liquidity is shifting, indicators, and everything else in between. And on this channel, that's exactly what I try to do for you. So, if you're new to my channel, please go check out the rest of my content. I try to keep you all updated on the day-to-day events, price action around Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins, how liquidity is shifting, and everything you need to be aware of. As I said, we did see a little bit of a rally in the market today, but if you don't really understand everything that's moving, then you think this is it. Altcoin season's about to start. We're about to send. December is about to start, so quantitative tightening is going to end, quantitative expansion and easing is going to start. Really crazy stuff. If you just keep up with the day-to-day, you can really understand the trajectory of the market. And this is why, I'm starting to get really, numb to everything that's happening in the markets and even my videos. Go check out the rest of my content. You can see the progression of me as an individual, and I plan to go full-time in crypto once everything starts to go really crazy. I'm day trading, doing all these different things, so it's a really fun time. If you're new to the channel, make sure you drop me a comment, like, subscribe, stay tuned. I'm going to drop you guys a market update tomorrow once we start seeing some of that important data roll out. And from there, I'm going to just pretty much get to y'all's questions and suggestions. I really do appreciate all the support you guys show me on the channel, trying to monetize, but YouTube freaking hates me, so I'm just having to work as hard as I can, even though I'm getting 30 views, 100 views, all these different types of views, even though my value, I think, is really much higher than a lot of these other, channels. But share the channel. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned. I said that already 100 times. I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. I'll catch you tomorrow. Peace.